Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Got John Kessel with me today, who might be the most accomplished guest we've ever had. He's the retired director of sport development at USA Volleyball. We connected after another podcast I was on, and he sent me a lot of stuff. And as I researched him, one thing I got really excited about is I saw a person that's adapted over time and really had some staying power in coaching. And his philosophy really aligned with the 3 C's that we talk about with impactful coaching. So, John, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah. Yeah, Ancora Imparo. You know what that story's about? Michelangelo said it at about the age of 85 while he was painting the Sistine Chapel, and he looked down to his assistants and said, "Ancora imparo," which means still learning. And so
Still learning.
always always been, like if the best painter maybe in the history of the world was still learning at the age of 85, we can be adapting too.
I think that's a good point. Well, I tried to figure out how to share your background without going on too long, couldn't figure it out. So, give everybody kind of the if you can give a minute or 2 of what you've done and, go from there.
Now I am very blessed because I made a choice that fiscally may not have been that great, but to not coach collegiately like my dear friends Terry Pettit in Nebraska and I don't know, six-time winning NC2A coach Russ Rose at Penn State. We're all kind of that same era in the early 70s. And I chose because of a guy named Stu McDowell out of Lamoni, Iowa, not too far from Friends,
Mhm.
to
Fun.
simply coach coaches so I can amplify the impact and take the science and research and studies and facts and not opinions and bring it into volleyball through motor learning, thanks to a guy named Carl McGowan, who got me going on that in '75. And that learning, if I were to say something to your listeners, no matter what their sport, this is a learning competition, not an athletic competition. It's with the teams that get great athletes or get 9-year-olds that you don't know who's good. It's a learning competition. And so I chose to do that. And the ripple effect means I've worked with Major League Baseball and NHL hockey teams and basketball, NBA teams, and collegiate teams, but mostly I do international volleyball, both for the World Paravolley for 25 years, the Paralympic sport of sitting volleyball, and for the FIVB. I'm on the development commission and both our zone of Norseca and the World Federation, the FIVB. I got a call tomorrow with them for 4 hours that we're going to be working on some plans. I go to India um, in about 3 weeks for 2 weeks, and I go work with the Let's Keep the Ball Flying Foundation, doing great things out of in economically disadvantaged areas. And the total effect of that is I've been to nearly 100 countries and to all 50 states more than once, coaching coaches. Like in June, I'll be doing the National High School Coaches Association convention, and I think it's in South Dakota that I'm going to. So I'm lucky because I get to steal ideas from them, all these coaches that I get to deal with, and then I get to shoot in the pipe slash, share the research and the things that we've learned after being at USA Volleyball, which is pretty good thing. There's a lot of good we're a pretty good volleyball nation in the world for sure.
Mhm. One thing you've mentioned when we've kinda gone back and forth before this and just now, and I'm fascinated with the kind of the topic of competence. One, because I think people are slow to adapt, but I think it's gotten more complicated in today's day and age because there's so much access to information and discerning what's good, what's bad, who to follow. Um, so I'm curious your take of if you're giving advice to coaches of, "Hey, if you wanna know what you're talking about, go to these places, do
Right.
these things." What's your advice to that young coach?
Interesting. My advice would be 2 kinda cue things. One is think critically. Um, and it's tied into motor learning where we know no matter what the sport, you need to train in reality. And in my experience, the vast majority of coaches in my sport, including me for probably 15 years, um, they not only coach the way they coach, but they practice for practice to look good and not training in the reality of whatever their sport is. And I can say, Rob, that I'm reluctant to say a black and white kinda good or bad, or wrong or right especially, um, because if somebody's not sitting on the couch eating bonbons and coming to the experience of a practice or training, at least they're there, you know? If
Mhm.
that's good, and whatever they're doing is better than sitting on the couch eating bonbons. That said, there is certainly a more effective and efficient ways to learn, and that's where, uh, we diverge, I think, in our sport to help people understand the concepts of motor learning and training in reality. I mean, I actually spend time with my parents teaching it. When I was up in Toronto just recently, I worked with the coaches and did a quick motor learning session sometimes if I had the time because it was a learning competition. And so how do we learn faster? And, uh, you know that it is random is more effective than blocked, and whole training is better than part training, and summary feedback is better than constant feedback, and all these other things that are part of the science and the research that has shown this is how we learn faster. That's all it is. We just learn faster. A great example with the kids. Every time I blew a whistle up there, they walked in the first time. And then I said, all right, you guys, because player empowerment is a huge part of it. We don't play volleyball. We teach it, and we don't even coach volleyball. If we were together here, you said, "Yeah, I coach volleyball." I'd hand you a volleyball and say, "Coach it." No, you don't coach volleyball because you can't coach volleyball. You coach amazing developing kids and leaders, athletes, or whatever. So I blew the whistle. They walked in, strolled in, and I said, "Okay, guys, if this half over here of identical twins spent the season sprinting in every time I blew the whistle, and this half strolled in like you just did, who's gonna get better at the end of the season?" And they all point to the group that I pointed to that's the runners, and I said, "So, we're gonna do that because I want you to learn faster, not because 'cause I'm making you punish. I don't punish with running. That's the last thing I would do. I don't punish. I The mistakes are the punishment. I want you to learn faster, and everything I'm gonna share today is how do we learn faster?" And, you choose to listen and then go, "Eh, it's a bunch of bull," and then go back to the way you taught, great. Keep teaching you where you're taught, but there's a lot of good people out here doing research. My sport, the I'm really lucky, Rob, because I have our legacy project for my wife and I is a veteran first responder healing retreat, www.bisonpeaklodge.org. And we heal vets and first responders through fly fishing, through music therapy. I don't offer the programs. I just offer this amazing valley that we purchased and share with everybody at no cost. And that chance there, well, you know who's coming? Another one that I would listen to is John O'Sullivan's Changing the Game project.
Mhm.
He's bringing Jerry Lynch and himself. We've heard rumors that even maybe Steve Kerr might come up, but whether he does or doesn't, he's bringing his top 30 leaders in coaching that he's worked with over time, and they're going to have almost a week on the property. So they're sharing secrets, and that's I th- I think in almost any sport, and I use the term Rob's critically think. I just before I went to Toronto, I screen capture Google's answer to this. I typed in volleyball drills. And unlike the last time I did it, it was now up to 42,400,000 choices. 42 million. And yet our national teams, which are Olympic medalist level, silver and bronze this past time in Paris, and gold for the women the year before that, the Tokyo Olympics. They do about 10 drills. Mhm. So what's up with that? Why aren't why aren't they doing some of the other 42 million, you know? And coaches that don't like change, they say, well, yeah, that's because they're Olympians, you know, type stuff. And I can tell you that in Toronto, I just did the same thing with the 9-year-olds that I did with their elite Pac-Man 17U, second ranked in the nation of Canada boys team. I did the same principles. Sure, it goes faster at that level and with more range and decision making and all these things. But the reality is that the ball goes over the net on the serve, and then it goes towards the net, and then it goes along the net, and then it goes over the net. And that's what they do at any age. But what I did when I think of young John that I often pick on, I let my kids practice for practice. I had them partner pass back and forth, just sending it back and forth. No net, just back and forth. And I created athletes who were very good at tennis, putting it straight back to where it came from, even though this is called three-hit volleyball. And then I spent a lot of my energy in the early 70s screaming, 3 hits, even though I didn't do any of that because it was too hard because they're so young or they're not good enough, or, you know. So training reality is a huge one for sure.
You've used a term a few times of motor learning. Define that for everybody just to make sure we're on the same page.
How do you acquire a physical skill? So, two great examples that I think resonate with almost any listener. One is your kids. If you have kids that have learned to drive a car, if you're a coach of any, male, female that's got kids, your kids watched you drive that car for 16 years. And when they sat in the driver's seat, did they know how to drive? And the answer is no, because they'd watched driving, but they didn't do the skill of driving. So your insurance rates are at something like $10,000 a month. And then as time goes on, as they drive, the insurance rates drop. But they could sit behind the wheel the very first day and do something like, damn it, or whatever, because they saw you do those emotions, you might say, uh, and learn from, because we learn by watching. So the skill of driving isn't learned until you do it. Now, there's a skill that almost everybody here listening knows how to do. It's called bike riding. And I reflect when I do clinics about how we learn to the motor learning skill of learning to ride a bike. Um, and you can die riding a bike. Sadly, some children get killed in the bike riding learning process, and I've never seen anybody die in volleyball. Um, so the quick question is, did your parents hire a bike riding coach? And of course, they didn't. Okay. Did they send you to bike riding summer camp? And in pockets, there's maybe a bike riding summer camp thing where you all bring your bike and learn to ride better. But 99.9% of the people go, no. Cool. How many bike riding drills, Rob, did you learn to do to ride a bike? How many drills out of 42 million volleyball drills? There's got to be a whole bunch of bike riding drills. How many did you do? And the answer is zero. I learned to ride the bike by riding the bike. And I failed, which is a huge part of learning a motor skill. The learning is taught through failure. because humans have variance. They have this bell curve. When you hit a hammer on a nail and hit it 100 times, you go, hey, I hit it 100 times. But when they look at the pattern on the head of the nail, it's a bell curve because you didn't hit this. You're not a machine in metal
Mhm.
machine in a rod, you're a human. And we have variance. And I use a line, Rob, that I think is pretty important: to be patient with the chaos, to be patient with the ugliness of learning. So when you as a mom or dad let your kid ride a bike, I hope you weren't too impatient with the falling. I hope you didn't, oh, they fell, drop and give me 20 push-ups, because I punish people after they err in skill learning. No, you didn't do push-ups or anything. The failure was the failure.
Mhm.
And then the last question on the bike riding principle, you might say, is, well, you must have done bike riding progressions. And nobody did. Nobody pedaled 30 times right-footed and 30 times left-footed. But somebody will always say, oh, but I learned with um, training wheels. I learned with training wheels. And the research, the science of training wheels over the course of decades shows that training wheels slow the learning process of riding a bike down, not speed it up.
Hmm.
What has changed, Rob, is that you go now and you get a balanced bike, because the principle of bike riding is balance, not something that is saving you from learning
Mhm.
by stopping you at a certain point in time. No, you just put your feet down on the ground and save yourself from falling. And kids that learn to balance on a balance bike ride pedal bikes right away. That said, have your listeners YouTube and peek at, type in backwards bicycle, and you will see a guy whose engineering friends, changed one thing on his bike, and that is that when it goes this way, the handlebars go the other way, not handlebars and bike goes the same way. How long did it take him? He's ridden a bike for 30 years. They made one change. This is called specificity and learning in part. They made one small change to his bike. How long did it take to learn to ride the bike? 8 months.
No kidding.
8 months. Now, his kid promised a trip to Australia to see the astronauts or something like that, because um, his kid learned in about 3 weeks, which is part of the science. Your brain, when you're young, is much more plastic, much more, we're ready to learn because we got to survive to become an adult. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, bike riding is a great example. And then using my sport again, uh, applicable to football or soccer and other sports. Um, when we have 6 on the court, or we're playing soccer 11 on 11, and then you've got another bench of, let's say, 6 more, 21 kids, so 42 people, and one ball on the pitch, that is incredibly horrible learning very fast. So my sport happens to have doubles as an Olympic sport, which is great. Soccer does futsal, basketball does 3-on-3. You and I certainly spent time shooting hoop alone and then shooting hoop in a one-on-one, or maybe we did cutthroat and one-on-one plus one or something. All those variations, that's when you're learning. We
Mhm.
need to keep this culture of play that gets eliminated by drills. I have a slide I use in my international courses. It shows, it's called volleyball math. 4 kids and a ball, what do? They play. 4 kids, a ball, and an adult, what happens? They drill.
Real.
You know, people say the game doesn't teach the game, my experience contradicts that. You know, I grew up, dad played doubles after World War II. He was a Navy captain, in his boat sailing to invade Japan, and turned around and the war is over. And he kept playing sand doubles volleyball. And therefore I played some sand doubles volleyball. And there's two names in my sport, Misty May and Karch Karai. Karch being the best player in the first 100 years, according to the International Federation, and Misty, three-time Olympic gold medalist in beach doubles. Karch is a three-time Olympic gold medalist in both sports, indoor and beach. And they grew up playing 2-on-2 with their mom and dad, not 6-on-6 until they got older. My son's a pro over in Europe. Cody Kessel, a five-time Bundesliga winner for volleyball for Berlin. He really didn't get serious about 6-on-6 till he was probably 16 or 17. He just played 2-on-2. And that meant he learned more effectively, learned to be an all-around player, and got better at reading, which in many sports is an incredibly important skill beyond the technique. And people just don't recognize the value of reading. And reading has to happen in not drills, but in the flow of the game, and anticipating what they're developing and things. So
Well, got a comment and a question.
good.
It's interesting based on a past conversation we had. My oldest is in 5th grade, and she just picked up club volleyball this year. And I mentioned to her, I was like, "Hey, I was talking to a guy, and he said, 2-on-2 volleyball is the way to go, when you can." And her reaction was, "Oh, I get to touch the ball more. Sounds great." And then she started
She's
recruiting
smart.
her friends to play with her. That was her exact reaction, and it goes along with what you just said.
Yeah,
Um
she's probably played some queen of the court or speedball type fast games 3-on-3, and, you know and if you don't do that in a practice, the young kids go, "When are we doing queen of the court? When are we doing speedball?" Because they get to
Mhm.
touch the ball more. When it comes over in a 6-on-6 tournament, y Rob, you could go the entire tournament and never touch a ball, you know, potentially, but in doubles? Oh, that don't happen.
Yeah, and
That's
nowhere to hide.
impossible.
So, um, you were using I wanna see if I'm translating this. My past world is baseball. I was baseball coach for about a decade, and, we used to always use example. I was a believer in kinda I don't know what the technical term is, but teaching positions. So, we try to get their bodies in the right position and then let them be athletes. So, an example that was used on me, I use with my players is I tell them to look me in the eye, and I'd have 3 balls in my hand and say, "Catch the balls, but look me in the eye." And your hands just naturally go to where the balls are going. And the illustration was get in the right positions and let your body be an athlete. Am I getting it a little bit? Is that a little bit of when you're talking about
Yeah, sure. I
motor
mean,
room?
I think that is teaching that kinda fun juggling thing. S
Mhm,
2 things come to mind. One is specific to coaching. Humans are hardwired to track moving objects.
mhm,
So, in that case, by looking you and with their peripheral vision, they're touching the ball because we're hardwired to be able to do that. That could be something that's gonna kill me or eat, or
mhm,
whatever, so I have to be afraid of the things that are moving.
mhm.
Um, as a coach, that means something different. As a coach, it means when you talk to your athletes, you have to find a wall, a corner, or a non-moving background.
Hmm,
You have to just back yourself
yep,
up to the wall, because if you're in a two-court volleyball situation or out on the field where there's 3 stations going on in baseball, and you talk to them where the baseballs are flying behind you, I ain't gonna be listening to what you're saying. I'm gonna
mhm,
be watching my teammates do their thing or what, or not even if they're teammates, just the flying ball and comparing myself to them and stuff. And that plus a really another little tip I think, of great value, which is put the player's name last. If I saw a teachable moment, pulled everybody together, I pulled everybody together and I go, okay, Rob, when we blah, should we blah or blah? And your answer is
Blue.
blah. And I go, yeah, we talked about that or whatever. That meant everybody else I called in did what?
Stop
They all
listening.
went, I'm not in this one. I'm out of here. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, well,
Versus,
that
versus you guys, when we blah, should we blah or blah?
mhm.
Rob, and that
Now you
little
got everybody.
change meant everybody else was worried that they were going to be asked, so they're engaged until I say Rob. And therefore, we're all learning more effectively from the wisdom of the coach
Yeah.
versus standing in a place where they watch the flying balls and don't pay attention, or being in a situation where I pull you in and then you um, don't have to think because I say the guy's name that I'm picking on first.
Mhm.
So,
Well, let's go into giving feedback a little bit. Um, I loved your saying of patient with the chaos or ugliness, giving people space to learn. I imagine a lot of that comes down to being able to provide feedback that doesn't cause them to shut down as they're learning. Um, Talk me through just how you give feedback, how you help kids deal with failure, and what advice you have.
all right. So, since the first thing is me, my body. Many coaches coach cross armed, and that's not an effective message to be sending to your kids. You need to put your arms behind your back if you want, or just at your side, or, hold a ball while you're walking around. But this isn't effective. There's a thing called summary feedback. And I think the most important part of my job in the gym is to catch kids doing it right. So young John did this, crossed his arms, came up to you, Rob, and why am I here? Because you did it right or wrong, probably. And the answer is wrong.
Probably wrong.
It was young
Yeah.
John. And I'm here to help. Don't get me wrong. I'm here to help. And I'd go, blah, 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 and then I'd see another mistake. And then I'd go
Mhm.
correct that. And then I'd see another mistake. And I'd go correct that. And it meant that to get my attention, which is a powerful reinforcer, your attention coach is very powerful in reinforcing. The only time they could get my attention is if they did it wrong. Well, that's not effective learning because that means they're going
Mhm.
to keep making mistakes to get your attention. Catching them being good, catching them doing it right means I still come up to you and I still ask questions. The feedback out of my mouth needs to be feed forward. It needs to be what I can do next time, not what I did for years, what I did wrong. That's ineffective. That's inefficient. And it's used to be John would say, you should have done this or do this in a even more command style. And now I say what? I say, could you have done? I think great coaches with younger athletes can see the difference between intent and outcome. And if you see the right intent, even though the outcome was a fail, celebrate the intent, reward the intent, even though they screwed it up. Feedback is best when it's specific. Young John would do this. That's it. Good job. Don't do that. I like that. And that has zero specificity into it. I mean, I have a whole series of Americans' funniest home videos of using your baseball example, T-ball kid. All right, kid, get your eye on the ball. and they lean down and they put their eye on the ball on the tee, you know, because words don't mean a whole lot to beginners. And another guy, the kid's hitting some leaves with his bat, and the dad says, "All right, batter up." And the kid says, "Bat her up?" And he goes, "Bat her up." And he goes over to his sister who's watching and starts to bat her. Well, at least that was semi-specific, but words to beginners don't mean a whole lot. It's best to show.
Mhm.
And so through that, it's called summary feedback. If you see 4 right and 1 wrong, don't say anything about the wrong. If you see 3 right and 2 wrong, talk about the 3 right. I'm even at if I see 2 right and 3 wrong, I talk about the 2 right. I don't wanna give energy and attention to all the wrongs. I want them to be thinking feed forward to what they can control, which is the next contact, and have feed forward about what I could do in the next one. I think the last phrase that I can tell you the most about my words in the gym is the term guided discovery. Young John told him what to do, and now I ask questions, even if it takes 5 questions to get to a thing that I could just tell them to do. I ask questions until they formulate an answer, what I already know to be true, but they problem solve it and answer it. We see in many sports error and then the head turn, error
Mhm.
and then the head turn. And that's because the coach is the source of all answers. No, you need to create 12 little assistant coaches out there, not everybody relying on you because you don't play. They have to problem solve in real time. So I know that there's some words I use when I speak, and I could throw 3 really fast at you. Stop saying try, stop saying don't, and stop saying but. And because of time constraints here, I'll just use the but as an example. That's a really cool red shirt vest thing you've got on, Rob. But what's coming next?
You're about to call me ugly.
Or something, oh, something negative, even though I said, "What a cool red vest shirt thing you have."
Mhm. Mhm.
So, to your listeners, just simply change the word "but" to "and." That's all. And you'll be a more effective learning, teaching coach, because if I said, "That's a really cool hoodie red thing you've got on, Rob," and you still hear that it's cool.
Mhm.
And yet, as a young coach, I said "but" all the time in my
So
attempts to you know?
yeah. So, as you say it, this all sounds very simple,
It
but
is.
in practice and learning it, it's very difficult. So
No,
talk
no.
about experiences teaching coaches to do this.
Well, my experience is that the first thing I say, it was about the 3rd slide. First slide says, "I'm asking you to change. And if you don't wanna change, let's not waste each other's time. Go 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 play some golf or do something you like. I don't want you to be here if you're not willing to change." Secondly is, I'm gonna pick on me and not you. I'm gonna show you time and time again that now that I'm 55 years into coaching my sport, I'm gonna show the things I did in the '70s, which they're probably still doing, and the things that I do now, and if I do my job, you are gonna completely see how it makes learning faster. And since time is of the essence in children's, youth, and even pro sports, William Penn, time is what we want most and use worst. Since time matters, I'm going to share things that I now know, and you should be able to see if you critically think that this is better, even though you've been doing that for 10 years or 20 years, you're going to know that this is better. And that's what was happening up in Canada. That's what India and Tanzania when I'm there in May. That's all I that's like it's a core. It is all founded on, and this was thanks to Carl McGowan kind of helped me realize this, that I'm here to share information and not criticism. Because when you criticize people, they're much more even reluctant to change,
Mhm.
athletes and coaches. So I'm here to give you information. Um, to Friends University, if you have any parent education going on, I'd argue that you should change it to parent information. Parents don't want to be educated, but they like information that they can use to maybe help their kid get better.
Mhm.
So stop forcing education on me and just give me the info. And when I say not criticism, I'm going to criticize young John. I'm going to criticize who I was. And then using all the science and research and things that I've learned the hard way and the ideas that I've stolen from you and other people, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to be much more effective in my learning time.
Mhm. So an example, I want your response on this. So, my first year I became a head college baseball coach. I had an assistant come up to me and he goes, he was kind of nervous because, he's my assistant, young guy, and I was a young guy, but he said, you say, you know what I mean a lot. So when you're talking to the team, you'll say, da, 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 you know what I mean? But you don't wait for a response.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like, "Oh my goodness, I feel like an idiot," and we came up with a system where he'd cough whenever I started doing it, talking to the team. I'd be aware. I could see using "but" and some of those things being the same way. So, any strategies or insights on short of just having somebody cough whenever they hear you say it to help people to pick up on these principles and of execution?
Yeah, my thought is simple. Even with 9-year-olds, I am teaching them how to learn faster, simpler at
Mhm,
the 9-year-old level, more effective, not effective, yeah, probably effective, but more detailed at the higher age group. And I would say to them, if I say, I know what I mean, and don't give you time to either answer it or just say it and then move on, me saying that is wasting your time and you won't learn as much in the season. So would you please, anytime I say, know what I mean? One of you or all of you say, no, we don't know what you mean, or respond, because that's less of a feedback and more of a filler. Some people do
mhm,
that in their speaking and stuff. Um, Yet it probably added up to both a not a chance to talk to you about what it means if they didn't know because you never gave them time to answer it,
yeah, I just kept
and
rolling.
it also is a filler that people naturally use, just like, and I just did
Mhm,
and it's a filler to put my thoughts together to say something more verbal. So I would simply, this is a great example, Rod, for me of player empowerment. Empower them. So using the "that's it," not being specific example that I really didn't close out, "That's it." My kids now go, "This it you're talking about. Care to be more specific?" Because they studied John Wooden, 76% of his wording, phrases to his athletes was specific information. So all coaches can be way more specific. And
mhm,
young John going, "That's it." What? My you like my shoelaces? You know what? It is nothing. You gotta be more specific. It's something I still work on. And
mhm,
I will share a John Wooden tale also because when we won the gold medal in Seoul before 9/11, you could walk around and talk anywhere on the plane. And I was getting ready to write a book called Impact. It's now 500,000 copies in volleyball out there. Um, it stands for increased mastery, because mastery is our focus, and professional application, rather than being a volunteer, a pro, but skillful at it, of coaching theory. And theory is, things that we're thinking about. And so it makes the word impact. And we want to have impact as a coach. Therefore, I wrote this book called Impact. And in doing so, I came up to Marv after we won the gold in the plane flight back from Seoul. And I said, Marv, I'm writing this book, brand new book, first edition's coming out for our coaches at USA Volleyball, called Impact. You did your thesis, because he did his thesis on John Wooden, his PhD thesis. You interviewed him for 100 hours or whatever. 25 words or less. What would you want a new coach to know that you learned from Wooden? His answer? I don't need 25 words, John. I just need 2. Be consistent. He said, that's what I learned watching him for all these hours. I was just blown away on how consistent he was. He wasn't the same with everybody. He treated everybody fairly, though, and he was consistent. Not equally, because they're different people, but fairly all the time, and he was consistent. And I flashed back to some of my coaches who were Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You
Mhm.
didn't know what the hell you were going to get. And that kind of wraps into Kahneman's research that I'm happy
Mhm.
to send to anybody, John_Kessel at MSN.com. His article called Decisions, which I believe I sent to you, um, it changed my coaching. It was the most powerful read that I think I'd ever done, because the short story, which I'll back up for a second, coaches need to be better storytellers. Humans are hardwired to remember stories better than information and facts. If you weave it into a story, they will remember it. Your parents put you to bed reading you bedtime stories. They didn't read you bedtime facts, you know? And so become a better storyteller. And James Layer has inner game of tennis, awesome thinker about a rebound sport, tennis, like volleyball, but he he has a YouTube clip called "The Power of Story," and 17 minutes, really worth it. It's a TEDx talk, as I recall. So the power of story here is that Kahneman was talking to Israeli fighter pilot instructors, not the pilots learning, but they are instructors. And he mentioned the power of praise and the way punishment doesn't work. And one of them said, with all due respect, I think what you're saying is for the birds, is what I think he said. Um, I've praised my pilots after a good landing, and invariably they do worse. And I have chewed them out in the tradition of my military after a good landing, and invariably they do better. Don't tell me that punishment doesn't work. My experience contradicts you. And Kahneman said it was the most exciting moment of my life. This is the book he wrote that's a New York Times bestseller, worth reading as a coach. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Mhm.
But, so tied into that, um, he stood in this room and went, oh my God, they don't know about regression of the mean. And then he elaborates on it. And to your listeners, a short version would be, if I receive serve 50% of the time right on the mark, and I go on a streak of doing 10 a row, 10 out of 10, not 5 out of 10, right on the mark, should you praise me, punish me, or ignore me? And my answer is, I'm going to praise you. I'm going to catch you being good. Mathematically, scientifically, statistically, probably in the next 10, what will happen? And it's not 0 out of 10 to balance it out. I'm 5 out of 10, boy. And I will probably do 5 out of 10 in the next 10,
Mhm.
10 out of 10. So I see that I jinxed you, going back to young John. I jinxed you. I broke your concentration. I shouldn't have said anything to anybody. I should have stayed quiet. No, you need to catch them being good.
Mhm.
The reason it's so important to me in this tale today uh, is because of the flip side. Young John, 0 out of 10. Sub, get over there, get on the bench. Rob, just sit down there. And I don't know what's wrong with you. You know, you're always you're always so good. You at least do 5 out of 10 all the time. And you're out there sucking. I mean, your grandmother's up in the stands and she's dying of cancer, and you're playing like this. What is wrong with you? And I'm young John would probably even say, drop and give me 20. Or we didn't play well in that game. And in the middle of the match, I'm making you do wind sprints. That's one that coaches do that makes me vomit. It makes me vomit because they're clearly they're not spending time learning why punishment doesn't work. And so after this, I say, Rob, ready to show me what you're made of? All right. You done thinking about this? And you're, yeah, I'm ready to get back out there. And what happens in the next 10? 5 out of 10.
Mhm.
See the punishment work with my own eyes, but it's not because of the punishment. So being comfortable with the chaos, being patient with the chaos means when they do bad streaks, let it roll through you. I coached a 13 under team one year, and we won 25-0, and we changed sides, and they served first, and we lost 0-25. Why? The why is because they're 13 and their
Mhm.
streaks are much bigger, but everybody has variation, and a combination of 6 of you and stuff, that happens sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Well, I have a hard end today, unfortunately. I've got a list of questions I wanna cover in a second episode.
Okay,
Um,
that sounds
but, uh but before we do, we always ask first-time guests, we do a rapid fire round where we we
yeah,
we ask questions. Now, you can't nobody's allowed to go longer
30 seconds.
than 30 seconds.
Okay,
So I got 4 for you. So,
alright.
first one, name a book that has most impacted your life.
Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Living, where you can choose your own attitude, and he, of course, was in the Holocaust and in the, prison, and he realized that he could choose his own attitude even in that hellhole.
Mhm. Talk about a failure that was good for you.
Phew. Um, I had a stroke about a year and a half ago because my diet was not very good, and it has didn't kill me like it did some other friends, and so now I have learned to improve my diet.
That's as best of example and stories I've ever heard on that question. Uh, how do you define success in your work?
Um, seeing the light go on in their eyes while we are teaching how to be more effective coaches. And tied into that, I now can say, when I went to Toronto, I'd written a blog called Growing the Game Together blog. It's still up on the USAV website, and I wrote about a ton of stuff. And two-thirds of them referenced it as to why they wanted me to coach their club, and how they had I changed them. And I never heard about that at all, from them, and yet they were saying your blog made a difference.
Yeah, cool. Last one. In the last 5 years actually, I'm gonna preface this. You can't use the same example you used in the second question. So
Okay.
in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Who? My life. Um, belligerent optimism.
Well, for the next episode, I wanna know how you came up with that term as well. Oh, well, John, I learned a heck of a lot in the last 50 minutes. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You bet. And thanks for
All right.
putting this together and, especially for making a difference there at Friends University to a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you, John.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you soon.